They say look for the red flags early, but Adrian Lancaster's flags were wrapped in bespoke cashmere and old money charm. I stood in the candlelit library of the estate manor, the ivory silk of my wedding gown heavy against my skin, listening to the murmurs of 50,000 live dream viewers waiting for me online. Everything was pristine. My career, my brand, and my multi-million-dollar contract with Gemstone depended on the flawless illusion of this day. Then, the door cracked open. My assistant Shadi stepped inside, her face drained of color, holding a phone displaying a live GPS tracker. Adrian wasn't stuck in traffic. He wasn't reviewing his vows. He had left our wedding venue entirely, abandoning me to go to the apartment of his secret mistress. In that single, devastating second, the soft-spoken woman I used to be vanished. The pain was sharp, but the anger that followed was pure, cold steel. I looked at the heirloom hand-fasting ribbon in my grandmother's hands. I looked at the empty space where my groom was supposed to stand. And then, my eyes locked onto Dr. Julian Vance, standing quietly near the family altar. The ivory gown fit like it was made for this moment. Zariah stood in front of the floor-length mirror, watching the candlelight catch the delicate beading along her waist. The phone buzzed. She smiled without looking, probably Shadi reminding her about the livestream countdown. She reached for it, still half watching her reflection, still thinking about how she would walk into that room, how she would hold Julian's hands, how 50,000 people were about to witness the most important moment of her career. She looked down at the screen. An anonymous number. No name. Just a video. She almost didn't open it. She did. 3 seconds. That's all it took. Adrian. A hotel hallway she didn't recognize. His hand pressed flat against the wall above a woman's head. His mouth on her neck. His wedding boutonniere still pinned to his lapel, the exact white gardenia she'd spent 2 weeks sourcing crushed against another woman's shoulder. The phone slipped in her grip. Zariah didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood completely still in her perfect gown and felt something she had never felt before. Not heartbreak exactly, but the specific, suffocating silence of a woman realizing she had been a fool in a very expensive dress. She watched it again. Then she saved it. Every second of it. Because she already knew, the way women always know before they can explain how they know, that Adrian Lancaster would walk back through that door with a straight face and a reasonable explanation and expect her to believe it. He would expect her to smooth her dress and smile and pretend the gardenia on his lapel hadn't been pressed against someone else's skin an hour ago. She needed that video for the moment he tried the ribbon and walked to the door. Shadi grabbed her arm. Zariah. Adrian isn't there yet. I know. Then what are you? I'm going to the ceremony. She pushed the door open. The candlelit room held only immediate family. Her grandmother at the center, ribbon in hand. Her mother's sisters along the wall. Adrian's parents seated with their practiced smiles, already impatient. And Julian Vance standing quietly near the back, hands in his pockets, wanting nothing more than to be invisible. Zariah kept walking. The ribbon had barely been tied before the room stopped breathing. Zariah felt it, the exact second every person in that candlelit library understood what had just happened. Her grandmother's hands didn't tremble. Her grandmother never trembled. She pulled the final knot tight, looked up at Zariah, and gave her one slow, deliberate nod. The Lancaster family didn't move. They didn't speak. Adrian's mother stood frozen near the altar, her champagne smile completely dissolved, replaced by something cold and disbelieving. Then the door flew open. Adrian Lancaster walked in, still adjusting his cufflinks, that signature move, that polished reflex, and stopped dead when he saw Julian's wrists bound to Zariah's with the ivory family ribbon. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Zariah had ever heard. What is this? It wasn't even a question. His voice was controlled, but his jaw had gone tight the way it always did when reality refused to cooperate with his plans. Zariah turned to face him for the first time since the morning. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. You weren't here, Adrian. 3 words. The room exhaled. His eyes moved from the ribbon to Julian to Zariah's face, scanning, calculating, looking for a version of this moment he could still control. There wasn't one. His mother grabbed his arm. His father turned away entirely. The Lancaster name had never looked so fragile. Security escorted Adrian out 11 minutes later. He didn't leave quietly. Across the city, a different kind of fire was burning. Julian's phone had been vibrating nonstop since the first photo leaked, someone's cousin, a grainy shot through a cracked door, already sitting at 40,000 views before the ribbon was even untied. His girlfriend, Camille, saw it the way the rest of the world did. No context. No warning. Just Julian's hands bound to another woman's, his face unreadable, his eyes, and this was the part she couldn't stop staring at, not panicked. Calm. He looked calm. She called once. He didn't answer. She called again. He picked up on the third. Tell me, she said quietly, that this is not what it looks like. Julian exhaled. And in that half-second pause, that single breath before his answer, Camille heard everything she was afraid of. I can explain. She laughed. Not the warm kind. Julian, are you bound to another woman right now? He didn't answer fast enough. And somewhere across town, Zariah's phone lit up with a notification that made her stomach drop, a name she never expected to see trending. Her own. You said. No, he came after the ceremony and she confronted him with the video. Baby,
he was still
please.
begging she
Just
enter
let me
her car
explain
to
inside.
her luxurious
There
apartments.
is no inside anymore, Adrian. She opened the car door. He grabbed her arm. Not roughly. Desperately. And that was somehow worse. Please. His voice cracked on that single word. The charm was gone. What was left underneath was something smaller, something that had never expected to be caught. Don't do this. Not like this. Zariah looked down at his hand on her arm. Then she looked at him. You did this. She got in. The door closed. The car pulled away. She didn't look back. Not once. But her hands were shaking the entire ride home. By the time her apartment building came into view, her phone had lit up with a name she hadn't expected. Julian Vance. And his message was only 4 words. We need to talk. The call from Gemstone came before the ribbon was even untied from their wrists. Zariah stood in the corridor of the estate manor, to her ear, her voice so calm it frightened even her. The executives weren't congratulating her. They were verifying. An emergency couples interview. 48 hours. Or the contract would be reviewed. Reviewed. That was the word they used. She knew exactly what it meant. 6 months. Play the part. Appear together, move together, perform every requirement the Gemstone contract demands. In exchange, she would personally fund Gifted Hearts. Full operational budget. New medical staff. Updated equipment. A charity gala with every major donor in the city in attendance. Julian didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, I have a girlfriend. I know. This would destroy her. I know that too. He stood up. Walked to the window. She watched him carry the weight of it, the clinic, the kids, his late parents' legacy crumbling floor by floor because the funding had run dry. He turned back around. Before he could answer, the door opened. His girlfriend, Camille, stepped in. She was dressed like she'd come prepared for a negotiation, not a crisis. Heels. Composure. Eyes that had already done the math before she walked through the door. She looked at Zariah the way women look at situations they've decided to control. 5 million, Camille said. Separate from the clinic funding. Private. Non-negotiable. Julian's face changed. Camille, you want him for 6 months? She didn't blink. Then that's what it costs. The room went still. Zariah held her gaze for exactly 3 seconds. Then she said, fine. Julian turned to look at her like she'd just signed something irreversible. Because she had. But the thing nobody in that room understood yet, the thing even Zariah hadn't fully processed, was that Camille's price had nothing to do with protecting her relationship. It had everything to do with ending it on her own terms. Zariah would only understand that later. Much later. Zariah handed Julian a printed document at 7 in the morning. He stared at it. Is this a script? It's a timeline. Where we met, our first date, the moment you knew. She sat across from him, coffee untouched, already in business mode. Memorize it by tonight. Julian set it down slowly. You printed a fake love story. I engineered a survival plan. He didn't argue. But something behind his eyes shifted. They spent 3 days drilling answers. Where was your first date? What's her coffee order? Does he snore? Zariah had answers for everything. Julian noticed she'd thought of details even a real partner might forget. That bothered him more than he expected. The morning jog started Thursday. 6 a.m. Central Park. Her idea, paparazzi sightings, organic content, controlled exposure. Julian showed up in silence. Zariah showed up in armor. By the 4th morning, something cracked. She tripped on a root. He caught her before she hit the ground. Her hand stayed in his 2 seconds longer than necessary. Neither of them mentioned it. That evening, she asked about his parents. She didn't mean to. It slipped out between reviewing interview answers and adjusting their fake anniversary date. Julian went quiet in a way that wasn't defensive. It was private. The kind of quiet that belongs to grief that has never fully been spoken out loud. My mother used to say the clinic was her 3rd child, he finally said. She meant it literally. Zariah didn't respond immediately. She just nodded. Then quietly, almost to herself, she said, my brand was supposed to be my proof. That I built something no one could take from me. Julian looked at her. Did Adrian try to take things from you before this? She didn't answer. But her jaw tightened. And Julian filed that silence away like evidence. Because something told him the fake timeline Zariah had printed so perfectly, the dates, the details, the distance, wasn't just strategy. It was protection. And whatever she was protecting herself from was bigger than Adrian's affair. The interviewer's name was Celeste Moore. She smiled like a woman who got paid to find cracks. Zariah had watched 3 of her interviews the night before. Celeste had dismantled a senator, a tech billionaire, and a newly married pop star, all in under 40 minutes. All with that same soft smile. And now she was sitting across from Zariah and Julian, with 4 gemstone executives in the back row and a live camera blinking red. Julian adjusted his cufflink once. That was the only sign he was nervous. Zariah noticed everything. Celeste leaned forward. So, tell me how you two actually met. Not the press release version. The real one. The room tightened. They had rehearsed this. They had a timeline, a story, specific details. Zariah opened her mouth. And Julian spoke first. She was arguing with a florist. Zariah turned to look at him. It was 2 years ago. A charity event. She had ordered white peonies, and they sent white roses, and she was very calmly, terrifyingly calmly, explaining to this man exactly why that mattered. Julian's mouth curved slightly. I stood there for about 4 minutes just watching her. And I thought, whoever ends up with this woman is either very brave or very lucky. The studio went quiet. Zariah hadn't moved. That story wasn't rehearsed. That story wasn't theirs. But the way he said it, the detail, the specificity, the quiet warmth, made something in her chest pull tight in a way she wasn't prepared for. Celeste smiled wider. And you, Zariah? When did you know? Every trained instinct in her body said, give the polished answer. Instead, she heard herself say, when he didn't ask me if I was okay. Julian looked at her. Everyone else asked if I was okay, she said quietly. After everything that happened. Every single person. But Julian just showed up. And stood there. And let me be angry. She exhaled once. That was the first time I felt safe in a very long time. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't safe. It was the most honest thing she'd said in months. And then Celeste asked them to demonstrate just a small moment of connection for the viewers watching live. Julian turned to her. She looked up at him. And something that had been building for 6 weeks, through every rehearsed morning jog and every careful conversation, broke the surface. He kissed her. Soft. Certain. Completely unplanned. The studio erupted. 50,000 viewers lost their minds online. And somewhere across the city, Adrian Lancaster watched the live feed go viral. His jaw tightened. He didn't change the channel. 3 weeks into the arrangement, Zariah almost believed they were going to survive it. The interviews were clean. The morning jogs were consistent. The comments sections were full of people calling them goals. Gemstone hadn't flinched. Julian's clinic had received its first funding transfer. Everything was holding. Then her phone lit up at 2 a.m. The headline read, "Zariah Brooks' new husband, still sleeping at his own address?" 7 photos. All time-stamped. All crystal clear. Julian leaving her building at night, laptop bag on his shoulder, keys to a different address in his hand. The media outlet had been watching for weeks. Zariah sat up in the dark and read every comment. People weren't just questioning the marriage. They were questioning her. By morning, Gemstone's PR director had called twice. The third call went to her lawyer. The message was the same across all 3. The morality clause in her contract required proof of cohabitation. If they couldn't provide it within 72 hours, Gemstone reserved the right to open a full audit of the marriage's legitimacy. Audit. That one word could unravel everything. She called Julian before 7. He picked up on the first ring, which told her he'd already seen it. "I know," he said. Before she could speak. "You have to move in." Silence. Zariah. Julian. 72 hours. He came over that evening with 2 bags and the expression of a man walking into a situation he had no language for. She showed him the guest room. He stood in the doorway and looked at it like it was a cell. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. That was the same night his girlfriend called. Zariah heard it from the kitchen. Not the words, just the tone. That specific pitch a woman's voice reaches when she has decided to stop being patient. Julian stepped out onto the balcony to take the call. Zariah didn't follow. But the sliding door was glass. She watched him press 2 fingers to his forehead. Watched him close his eyes. Watched him nod slowly at something he clearly did not agree with. He came back inside 20 minutes later and sat down at the kitchen island without a word. Zariah set a cup of tea in front of him. "How much?" she asked quietly. He looked up. "She wants another payment," he said. "To stay quiet. And to let this," he gestured vaguely at the apartment around them, "continue." Zariah didn't blink. "How much, Julian?" He told her. And the number sitting between them in that quiet kitchen felt like the beginning of something neither of them was ready to name. Zariah told herself she wasn't watching him. But she was. Julian had been living in her apartment for 11 days, and in 11 days he had never once made her feel crowded. He woke up before her. Made coffee without asking how she took it because somewhere along the way, he'd just learned. He left the bathroom counter clean. He never raised his voice. He never needed anything from her that she wasn't ready to give. That was the problem. She didn't know what to do with a man who took up space quietly. On the 12th morning, she came out of her room at 5:47 and found him already at the kitchen counter, sleeves rolled up, reading something on his tablet. He didn't look up. He just slid her coffee mug to the edge of the counter without a word. She stood there longer than she should have. Then she sat down. They didn't speak for 20 minutes. And it was the most at home Zariah had felt in years. That terrified her more than anything Adrian had ever done. She was falling. She could feel it. And she had absolutely no intention of letting it happen. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that across the city, Adrian Lancaster was unraveling. His lead corporate backer had quietly withdrawn from 3 joint ventures that week. 2 more were expected to follow. The public fallout from the wedding had been worse than his PR team projected. Brands didn't want his name attached to theirs. His old money social circle had grown strangely silent. Adrian Lancaster was watching his life dismantle itself. Slowly. Publicly. Elegantly, the way karma always moves when it's in no rush. And he blamed Zariah for all of it. He had started making calls. Quiet ones. The kind a man makes when humiliation tips into something darker. Someone had mentioned they had access to a copy of the financial agreement between Zariah and Julian. The actual contract. Numbers. Terms. The 6-month arrangement spelled out in black ink. Adrian had smiled for the first time in weeks. That same evening, Zariah was standing at her window when Julian appeared behind her, not touching her, just close, and said quietly, "You don't have to keep bracing for impact, you know." She didn't turn around. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "What if I've been doing it so long I don't know how to stop?" Julian didn't answer right away. and the silence between them said everything neither of them was ready to admit. Neither of them knew what Adrian had already set in motion. Zariah won 3 rounds before Julian accused her of cheating. She wasn't cheating. She was just faster than him and completely unwilling to pretend otherwise. They'd stumbled into the game night by accident. A power flicker, a dead streaming service, a drawer full of old card games she'd forgotten she owned. Now it was past midnight and neither of them had moved from the living room floor in 2 hours. Julian ate the hottest chip on the dare plate without flinching. Zariah watched him with pure suspicion. "You've done this before. Competitive medical residency." He shrugged. "You learn to eat fast or you don't eat." She laughed. A real one. The kind that surprised her on the way out. And Julian caught it, that flash of unguarded Zariah, and looked back down at his cards before she could notice him noticing. She noticed anyway. The room felt smaller than it had an hour ago. Warmer. The kind of warm that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fact that she couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that with someone who wasn't performing for her. Adrian used to perform. She understood that now. Julian just existed. Steadily. Completely. Right next to her. She picked up her next card. Her hands weren't entirely steady. The night gifted hearts reopened. Every person in that ballroom believed in something. The children whose lives had been saved by Julian's hands believed in miracles. The gemstone board believed in the power of a perfect couple. And Zariah, for the first time in longer than she could remember, had started to believe in herself again. She didn't see Adrian walk in. She felt him. That particular chill. The one she used to mistake for electricity. Julian noticed her go still before she said a word. His hand found the small of her back, not for the cameras. Not for gemstone. Just instinct. Just him. Then Adrian's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Before anyone raises another glass tonight, there's something this room deserves to know." He was holding an envelope. Zariah's blood ran cold. She knew exactly what was inside it. The contract. 6 months. Zariah's signature. Julian's signature. Every transactional clause written in black ink on white paper, reducing everything they had become to a business arrangement. Adrian smiled the way he always smiled when he thought he'd already won. This marriage, he announced, loud enough for the gemstone executives to hear, was never real. It was a deal. A financial agreement with terms and an expiration date. Everything you've seen, the interview, the kiss, all of it, was purchased. The room shifted. Zariah felt the floor tilt beneath her heels. And then Julian stepped forward. He took the envelope from Adrian's hand calmly, without hesitation, the way a surgeon moves when everything is on the line and panic is not an option. He didn't read it. He didn't defend it. He tore it in half. Then again. Then again. Until it was nothing. Julian turned, not to the board, not to the cameras, to Zariah. Only Zariah. "It started as a contract," he said quietly. "But I stopped honoring that contract the night I realized I couldn't picture a single morning without you." Her throat closed. "I don't need a clause to love you. I don't need a timeline. I don't need Gemstone's approval or anyone else's." He stepped closer. "I just need you to know that what I feel is real. And it isn't going anywhere." Zariah felt something inside her, that last locked door, the one she'd been guarding since the day Adrian walked out, open completely. She reached up and pressed her palm flat against his chest, right where his heart was. "Then stay," she whispered. And he did. Behind them, Adrian walked out of that ballroom alone. Nobody watched him leave. They were all watching the man who chose to stay. And for the first time in her life, so was Zariah, finally certain she was exactly where she was supposed to be. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button right now and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss what comes next. Because I promise you, the next one hits even harder. I'll see you in the next story.